All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to start the Regional Transportation Committee for Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. Welcome, everyone here. I'm Jeff Baker, the chair. I will call the meeting to order. I'll ask if there's anybody here for public comment. Have anybody online? All right, we will move on from public comment. Item number 3 on our agenda is approval of the June 17th, 2025 Regional Transportation Committee meeting summary. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look over that meeting summary. Are there any corrections that anyone would like to make? All right, then those meetings will stand as approved. We do have 2 action items today, and I believe we have a quorum, right?
Yes, we do.
All right. So we're going to move on to item number 4, which is the Regional Transportation Plan Update, the Regional Roadway System. This is attachment B in your packet, and we will be hearing this morning from Alvin Badal-Sanchez, the Regional Transportation Planning Program Manager. Good morning, Alvin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So an item related to our Regional Transportation Plan update, one of the first actions that our committees and board take during our update to the RTP. So I'll do a quick overview of what our regional roadway system is, some actions that we've taken as staff, get to the recommendation for what that network looks like, and then we do have a recommendation for you at the end. A quick reminder, we've had a couple discussion items around the regional roadway system, but this is the network for eligible projects in our regional transportation plan and our transportation improvement program. We fix it, as we say, at the beginning of the RTP update, so it is one of the first actions that our committees and board take. Ideally, these are the most heavily traveled or important connecting roadways in our region. For those who are interested in seeing what the current network looks like, it is available through our DRCOG data tool linked in the electronic version of the packet. It's currently made up of freeways, tollways, what we call principal arterials, and then major regional arterials. During the update, DRCOG staff have taken a couple actions to review the current network. The first one, making sure all roadways on that network are federal aid eligible so that they can receive federal funds on them. We've been vetting a proposed expansion that DRCOG staff initiated to add roadways classified as major collectors and above in our rural areas, and to add any missing Colorado state highways. So that vetting has included presentations at county forums, one-on-one meetings to see whether the roadways that were proposed in that framework addition made sense to include. In addition to the DRCOG staff-initiated revisions, we did also hold a call for revisions for our local member governments that ran from mid-March to mid-April. And so you'll see a map, as well as one of the attachments is a list of what those revisions were proposed from our local government partners were. I already mentioned that we did present at county transportation forums as the opportunity arose to provide a one-on-one on 101 on what the regional roadway system was, and answer any questions related to the ongoing call for revisions, talk through what some of the justification rationale staff were looking for during the call, and then as needed met one-on-one with local agencies to do that same thing, answer any questions, provide an overview of the system. So on screen right now, also included in your packet, is a map of the proposed revisions to the regional roadway system. In teal are locally submitted additions. Dashed red are locally submitted removals. Gold, locally submitted realignments. Pink, DRCOG suggested additions. And then in gray is our existing regional roadway system. You'll notice there's a hefty amount of pink on this network. As we were looking at revising the network this cycle, DRCOG staff proposed an addition in our rural areas, adding roadways that might not otherwise have been captured in our urban areas, recognizing that in our mountain communities, in our Eastern Plains communities, some of these roadways serve a more critical function than they might in their urban counterpart setting. This map is also accompanied by a list of those suggested revisions in the packet. Some of them are broken out into more than one segment, so you'll see a few of these. It might be 4 or 5, depending on what the name of that roadway might be at that particular location. recommended regional roadway system edits are now shown on the screen. In dark blue on your screen are the DRCOG suggested additions that we're proposing moving forward. In light blue, those we're suggesting not moving forward. In dark pink, those locally suggested additions or realignments that we're proposing moving forward. And then in light pink, those we're proposing not move forward. A change from the Transportation Advisory Committee presentation, you do see some gold that showed pending DRCOG staff review. We have completed that review, so this map does not reflect that, but the list of segments in the attachments do show that we do have a recommendation for particular segments in that area that we would like to include in the regional roadway system. As you work through the list, you'll also see some that just note no action needed. We did receive some submittals that were data issues on our end or weren't needing to be captured in this particular effort, and so you will see a number of those noted as no action needed. We have a recommendation before you to move to recommend to the board the adoption of the regional roadway system dependent on federal functional classification and planning boundary. As this network continues to be set, one of the exploration staff will continue is roads that might be along our boundary, are they actually within our planning boundary? And then we also want to make sure any roads we're adding are appropriately classified in the federal functional classification system, and if not, taking steps as appropriate to change those revisions. The TAC did make a unanimous recommendation, and the only change I noted earlier is that we do now have a recommendation for those small segments in gold that were still listed as pending earlier. That concludes my presentation, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Alvin? Yes, Director Mulvey.
I noticed there's a lot more rural, or previously rural, especially through the Pike National Forest. Well, how did that come about that they were now determined because of more usage or because of?
So in our rural areas, both on the Eastern Plains and the mountain communities, we looked at a particular classification that's still eligible federal dollars and proposed that addition back to local government staff as would this make sense to include? Are they important roadways in your own county area that are critical to travel for particular communities? And so we just started with just that first threshold, it's this classification. We then had one-on-one conversations with different staff to see whether those additions actually made sense. Was there enough travel on that? Was it a critical connection to a particular community? Did it connect to a potential important recreation area in that area? So not all of the proposed additions that were suggested by staff in those areas were carried forward, and that was based on just local knowledge in the area.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Shelley.
I wondered if, you know, a lot of the communities on my side, on the west side, have been updating their CWPPs, their wildfire protection plans, and evacuation routes have become a key of that. Does this affect how communities can plan for or improve or widen or something like that, Alvin?
It does open up those roadways to funding through our transportation improvement program if they're in our metropolitan planning organization area. And so new roadways that weren't previously eligible are now eligible, assuming this network moves forward in its current form through our regional transportation plan and our transportation improvement program. There is other work that we do in the region that's beyond just this particular network though. So there are other opportunities potentially to include other segments like that in other complementary planning that's ongoing.
Glad to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? All right, I'd be looking to have a motion to recommend that the board adopt the regional roadway system dependent on federal functioning classification and planning boundary. Right, we had multiple. I'll take Shelley Cook's motion. Is there a second? Second from Director Pakbaz. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Going to move on to our second action item this morning. This is an annual Transportation Advisory Committee review. This is attachment C in your packet, and we'll be hearing from Jacob Rieger the manager of multimodal transportation planning.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Chair Baker and everyone. So this item concerns our annual review of the Transportation Advisory Committee, and the action, which I'll show you in a moment, is actually to approve some of our special interest seat representatives. First, a little bit of background. I don't have a presentation here. This memo is in your packet, so I just kind of want to walk through the memo a little bit. We do have in our DRCOG committee guidelines an actual requirement that we do an annual review of our Transportation Advisory Committee membership. I do that with our chair, so Chair Baker. Each year, we let Chair Baker know kind of how it's going on the committee, any membership turnover, how the committee is functioning. The Transportation Advisory Committee is very important to our work as a metropolitan planning organization. All of our MPO-related activities, and the previous agenda item is a very good example of that. Those items start with our Transportation Advisory Committee. Technical folks, senior staff, primarily from your local governments, but also your other agencies as well, CDOT, RTD, our other agency partners, as well as I said, the special interest seats, which I'll cover in a moment. So these folks come together each month. They help us work through our major planning processes and products. Again, like the previous agenda item, make a recommendation that comes to you each month. So a very important role that this committee fulfills. Let's see. Okay, sorry, thank you. Just wanted to scroll down as I walk through the memo. A reminder, and this is explained in the memo, a couple years ago, we made some major updates to our DRCOG committee guidelines. So just kind of a reminder of these as they apply to the Transportation Advisory Committee. One of the biggest changes was that previously, whenever we had a local government member or alternate vacancy on TAC, we would sort of work with local folks, come up with a sort of consensus recommended candidate, and the DRCOG board chair would approve that person directly. Well, ever since we've had our sub-regional transportation forums, the way that we've done that is to actually go to the forums and have the forums recommend a candidate. So one of the changes we made to our committee guidelines was that actually now the forums will directly approve the new member or the new alternate whenever there's a local government vacancy. We also expanded the committee membership. We now have 40 Transportation Advisory Committee members, with 20 as a quorum. So while we don't include every single of our 59 local governments in the region, we do include many of them and wanted the TAC to be more representative. Let's see. And then the other thing that we did, the bottom bullet here, is that, as I've referenced, we have several what we call special interest seat members on our Transportation Advisory Committee. I believe that we have 9, we're up to 9 special interest seat members. These are folks in areas of like housing and equity and other sort of related disciplines of transportation planning, these subject matter experts who are members of TAC and help the TAC do its work. These special interest seat members are actually approved by you based on the recommendation of the board chair. One of the changes that we made in our DRCOG committee guidelines was that they would be on kind of 2-year terms, and then we would assess at the end of 2 years whether they wanted to continue, whether we wanted them to continue. I would make a recommendation to our board chair, who would make a recommendation to you. So on the next, here we go. Based on when these folks were appointed, so not all 9 were appointed at once, they're kind of on rolling terms, but of the 9, we have 6 folks listed here: our aviation person, business, freight, housing, older adults, and transportation demand management. These 6 special interest seats, these folks are up for a 2-year term renewal. Based on staff's recommendation to Chair Baker. These are great folks doing a great job on the committee. We've recommended to him, and he's recommending to you, that all of these folks continue in their special interest seat roles for another 2-year term. And so the motion that we have, and I would also point out, this is one of the very few things, in fact, I believe it's the only thing that RTC actually approves directly. This does not go to our board, it comes to you, because this committee is the embodiment of our federally required metropolitan planning organization process our 3C planning process. And so in that role, this committee approves these special interest seat members directly. So the motion in front of you is move to approve the 6 Transportation Advisory Committee special interest seat representative appointments that are nominated to you by the DRCOG board chair. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, Director Maurer.
Thank you, Jacob. You know, I'm part of the sub-regional when it all started, and so I know I came to some of the TAC meetings, but my question is, and I don't have any problems with the appointments, but how much interaction is there from these committee members with the TAC?
With the special interest seat members? Yeah, no, they're full members of the committee. And so when we have TAC meetings, you know, everyone kind of sits together, they commingle. So I'd say there's really good interaction between the different types of members that we have on the TAC. So whether you're a local government member, whether you're a special interest seat member like these folks, whether, you know, you're CDOT, RTD, everyone sits together at the same table and helps make those decisions together. Is that your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to see how much they participated in overall conversation.
Yeah, they do. I mean, you know, look, to be honest, you know, when you see the list of these very specialized disciplines, I mean, how often do we have an aviation, for example, item that's directly that we bring to TAC, right? But the point is that these are really smart folks that, yes, they specialize in their areas of expertise, but they find ways to contribute on just about all the items that we bring forward. And frankly, we're doing a lot of this work. I mean, we're updating our freight plan, we're updating our, you know, we're preparing a regional housing and transportation strategy. So I think most of these folks feel on any given meeting that they find, you know, things of value to them and they can contribute to the overall discussion.
Thank you. I will just say that Jacob does a great job, you know, keeping me informed about attendance at these meetings and participation. And I also hear from the other TAC members as well, not only about the special interest seats, but about how the TAC is going. So it is something that we monitor, that we keep our thumb on the pulse to find out, you know, how things are going. And so, yeah, I am completely happy with these 6 members on this, but be interested. And if you know somebody that you're looking at this list, not only the special interest, but TAC itself, and you know somebody that you think would do a good job on that, we occasionally have some vacancies, and so if you have somebody that you think might do a good job on that, let us know ahead of time, just so we can keep their name kind of in a side pocket. You know how sometimes you get mailed resumes, and you kind of set them aside and say, well, the next time I have an opening, I'm calling that person. Something along that lines, I'd be happy to do that as well.
And Chair Baker, you raised a good point that I should have mentioned, so thank you. Whenever we do have a vacancy on these special interest seats in particular, we have instituted a practice over the last several years of generally having a competitive recruitment for these seats. Now, not every single seat is situated the same way. So to pick on aviation, again, it's a little bit harder to do a competitive recruitment for the aviation seat when it becomes vacant. But most of these seats, we actually do and have done a competitive recruitment where we actually will solicit candidates and then sometimes even do interviews if we get several candidates. So when we do have a vacancy, you know, we try to be really fair and equitable about how we fill these seats. So thank you for raising that point, Chair.
Karen Baker.
When you do fill these seats, is there any kind of geographic consideration that it's balanced representation across the region?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So keeping in mind that the majority, not completely, but the majority of TAC membership is local governments, that is where we primarily have that geographic equity in making sure that our local governments are represented across the region. When it comes to these seats, geographic equity can be a consideration. It's frankly a secondary or tertiary consideration, only because what we're really looking for is the subject matter experts in these particular disciplines. So yes, we want to make sure that we have voices from across the region when it comes to these special interest seats. So we want to make sure that we've got the right subject matter folks that can help us do the work.
Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, sir, very much, and thank you for the question. Jacob answered it, of course, appropriately. But the other thing I would like to point out is, like, with these special interests, what we try to do is kind of alternate those out. Like, for example, like the aviation one is from DIA right now. It'll always be DIA to me. We've rotated that out through the years. We had Centennial Airport representation on there, right, Jacob, in past years. You know, so just within the discipline itself, we try to mix it around a little bit.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the 6th Transportation Advisory Committee Special Interest Seat representative appointments nominated by me as the DRCOG Board Chair.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Schuyler. Second from Director Maurer. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. Thank you, Jacob. We're going to move on now to our discussion items. Number 6 is small area forecast, member agency feedback update. We've got Zach Feldman, Data Science and Analytics Program Manager. Good morning, Zach.
Good morning. We're going to quickly run through the update that has happened with our smaller forecast and how we've incorporated local jurisdiction feedback. So we're going to first kind of cover what the forecast is, how we model it, how we solicited feedback, and then where folks can see this new forecast. So just a bit of a timeline. We shared this forecast from January 20th through February 21st for feedback from local stakeholders, jurisdictions, and agencies. We held a webinar on the 27th to walk people through the new forecast. We also had office hours available with DRCOG staff to allow for one-on-one questions. And follow-up emails were sent to every jurisdiction or agency that provided feedback. And we also had a follow-up webinar to share the updated forecast after this feedback process. So a quick overview of what this forecast represents. We call it a small area forecast because it's done at a very small geography, so at the census block level. We are looking from 2020 through 2050. And this forecast is primarily used as an input to the travel demand model focus here at DRCOG, and it's also used as an input to DRCOG's regional housing needs assessment. This forecast always starts with state demography office data. So we start with county level forecasts for population and households, and then the demography office also provides regional level jobs forecasts. We also incorporate other aspects from demography office information, such as household structure, so in terms of older adults, age of head, presence of children, number of adults living in a household. And then we use Urban Sim, which is a open source land use model. This land use model, it's constrained by all of the inputs we put in from census data, from the demography office, and from zoning data and information we get from local jurisdictions. And there are many sets of choice models. So when we allow the model to place households, they are placing them differently by income, age of head, and the same for employment. There are different choice models estimated for different sectors. It allows for movement within the region, so households can move to kind of better simulate household movement around the region. This is a quick look at kind of the process of 1 year. And a key piece to notice is that what we call scheduled development is in there. So we we start modeling in the 2020 year. That's our base year. We tie that to census data, but we know, looking on the ground, where employment has landed and where housing has landed. So we can put those in manually so that we have a quasi base year that's 2024, because we just go ahead and manually put all of that in that we can see on the ground. Another piece to notice is in the green on either side, we've updated our model to better represent demographic change. Previously, to account for the increase in older adult households, the model kind of requires adding more older adults. That's not really how real life works. The older adults are here, they're just aging into that cohort. So now we've been able to implement where we age all of the households and then backfill with younger adult households to better model household creation. This becomes important and that we relatively soon hope to share this in other geographies and other use cases for agencies and local jurisdictions to use. So we'll feel much better about the demographics. Critically, we tie every single census block to a development capacity for households and jobs. So we estimate from existing zoning types how many housing units and how much employment can land in each zoning type. There are over 1,900 unique types, so we really are not able to read through and estimate from the code itself every single one. So we do estimation exercises to get us close. So for the vast majority of them, that works pretty well. And then where we see areas not work as well, we can then go in and read through the zoning code. And also then jurisdictions can provide us feedback if we seem to be over or under hitting those capacity numbers. And then finally, just again to point out, the local jurisdiction feedback really helps in this process, that if they tell us that an area is not expected to grow that much, we can go in and double check the zoning to see if we have overshot things. And in terms of the scheduled development data, we have, here we've listed two, CoStar and Zonda are subscription sources that we subscribe to. Zonda is primarily single-family units. CoStar is primarily commercial and multifamily. We also use the housing data sets that the GIS team at DRCOG maintains, so that through about 2024, we could see what exists. Beyond that, we then use these two subscription services. So multifamily, we have a good idea through about 2026, 2027. Single family, the runway for that is so much longer with the large master plan communities that we have an idea of what the capacities for those could be out to 2050, 2060. Those go way out. And because there's so much kind of on the books in this region, particularly with the master plan communities, we will update the capacities if we see that there's a large project that's anticipated, but we tend not to put it in as scheduled development and manually put it in until we see that its construction has started or is near starting. So we received feedback from 12 jurisdictions and agencies with 105 comments. And that actually led to a pretty big shift in the capacity. So 2,800 census blocks, we adjusted the capacity, 169 projects. It came out to almost 8,000 housing units were added in those 169 projects. So how did we incorporate this feedback? We increased and decreased the capacities. We are still ultimately constrained by the demography office forecast. So we tend to allow those capacities to change with jurisdiction feedback, but we don't want to be too heavy-handed because it's got to come from somewhere else. So within the county, it's constrained. So if we add more to a jurisdiction, then it may lead to less land in another jurisdiction or in the unincorporated. So there's always kind of trade-offs to adjusting what's coming out of this model. And then particularly, we applied a lot of changes from the feedback to plan unit development, since the kind of underlying zoning code doesn't necessarily tell us a whole lot, because until they're kind of approved and construction started, it's hard to know what is going to land there, particularly on the employment side, since that tends to move faster than the housing side. And then just a few examples of where our data can kind of give us blind spots. So hotel to apartment conversions, rehabs, demolitions, we don't necessarily see well in CoStar. So it's important to get that feedback from jurisdictions. There's several sources where we can see this data online. So there's a web map link here, and this is also available on the Small Area Forecast web page at DRCOG.org. And then there's also a transportation analysis zone shapefile that can be downloaded directly from DRCOG's data catalog. Just a quick note, there are, particularly for employment, we have some pretty strict use agreements with the state to get the QCW data. So we can't share that if a geography that we're looking at has fewer than 3 employers, or one employer is more than 80% of the employment in that geography. So there are some areas that we can see here. 57 of the 2,300 block groups are suppressed in that map, and 200 of the 2,300-ish TAZs are suppressed. So there won't be any, it'll just show up as a blank for the employment count. This doesn't apply for the modeling itself. So consultants that are using the focused transportation model, they get the full data set, but they have signed licensing agreements that protect DRCOG and protect the state data. Just a couple idea of where the timeline of integration of this. So this newest forecast has been incorporated to the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. The scenario process was underway before the feedback could be integrated. So it has the updated forecast, but it doesn't include the feedback. The RTP, air quality conformity, kind of the main runs for the RTP, will include the most updated version. And happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Zach? Karen?
I am assuming then this is the model that you use ridership forecasts, say for, is this what it's based on?
So anything coming out of the travel model, it would depend on kind of what version. So in the transportation plan, they will be using this newest version of the model. If a consultant were doing modeling of ridership or transit use or car usage along a corridor, they would probably be using kind of the last RTP's version, which does not have this updated model. But for all of the transportation model versions, the Small Area Forecast is that kind of base land use input.
And then
Yes, please.
I think I know this, but I guess I'm very impressed. So the exercise that you've just gone through, collecting all of this information, this means that all of the apartment complexes and growth is occurring, housing development, say in Erie, all of that is up to date now in this model.
Yeah, so anything that is kind of on the ground, we pretty much have every bit of that. So the GIS team does a great job of collecting data from all the counties. So they have a good idea of at the parcel level what has been built. Plus they use their planimetric data where they're flying planes over, and they also double check to see have buildings been added and landing and making sure that those are added. Beyond that, then it's a mix of CoStar and Zonda, which we subscribe to, and then also feedback from the jurisdiction. So if we hear that a jurisdiction thinks we're missing something, we can go in and add it as both scheduled development if there's a project starting we're missing, or increase the capacities if there's a kind of anticipated project.
Jacob? Yeah, thank you, Chair Baker. Director Banker and everyone, just to your point, just a couple supplements to Zach's excellent answers. Just the fundamental importance of this work. This is actually, among other things, a federal requirement. Yes, this model is used. This is our primary kind of source of future growth and development. When we adopt our regional transportation plan, one of those federal requirements is that we show our future land use and growth and development assumptions as part of that work. And so everything that Zach has just described is a fundamental piece of meeting that requirement and really does set the baseline for the work that we do and for what others do in the region in terms of understanding how we're growing and changing over time. And then, without getting too technical, when it comes to specific kind of ridership forecasting and modeling, we start with this model, but the Federal Transit Administration actually requires something called a STOPS model. And I'll give you an example. DRCOG is currently leading an alternatives analysis study for the extension of Colfax Bus Rapid Transit into Aurora out to E470. And as part of that alternatives analysis work, we're working with RTD to actually use their STOPS model, your STOPS model, to do some of that detailed ridership work as we're working through the alternatives that we're considering. So our two staffs work really closely together because it uses some of the same data and consistency in the network and the service assumptions and those sorts of things. So this all interrelates together, and we're grateful for that partnership with RTD to do that work.
Other questions or comments? Director Mulvey?
Sounds like you've incorporated this, but when I think of the small cities and the small areas, it always comes to mind that we have some primary employers and residences who span a county line. So I think of Lockheed, which is, 20,000 people who work right on the edge of Jeffco, but pretty much all live in Dougco, most of them. So does it account for that when you look at the small area geographies?
Yeah, and so the Lockheed is actually a really great example because we're doing this forecasting at the census block level, and out there at Lockheed, the census blocks are weird shapes. So we've actually got in at times and manually adjusted some of those to move. So for example, in the tax data, all those employees may be landing at one dot in kind of that upper facility. And we've got it manually separated out so that we can spread those out across the facilities into other census blocks. We've done similar things for CU Boulder. All those kind of land at kind of one dot in an administration building. And we then kind of move those around the campus onto other census blocks to better cover that. So, yeah, there have definitely been some cases where we've, particularly for the biggest employers, had to kind of move things around, make sure they're landing correctly. Our GIS team also does a lot of work, particularly with public employees, where, for example, all of Denver firefighters are listed as landing on Colfax, same with teachers. So they spread those out to city buildings of which they have a list so that we get a more representative placement of that employment.
Well, thank you. I and my county would appreciate that fine tuning because it matters very much.
Director Maurer?
Thank you. Zach, thank you for this. Curious, when you're thinking your counties like Arapahoe County, and then they're bringing in their individual cities or whatever, right? And so then you're getting that feedback from the actual cities saying what our plan is and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's all I need. Thanks.
I was just going to comment that this seems a lot like there's a science, but there's an art. And the decision on when to actually, I've seen so many things, land use decisions coming before the Board of County Commissioners, our Planning Commission, that so many changes can take place before actually breaking ground. So the fact that you wait until, there's some sign beyond mere planning to actually say that this is going to happen, this development will happen. I think that's part of the art of that.
Yeah, and that's come up a lot as we've improved the model over the last 6 or 7 years. We've become much more conservative in that way, just because there could be a development that's planned, and you don't know if it's going to be 1 year, 5 years, or 30 years, or maybe it'll never start. So Zonda has really been helpful for that, because they give us data on when they break ground and also the number of developable lots. So we know, are they moving dirt? Do they have lots that have utilities and sewage, electricity, everything hooked up and ready to be building? So it's really helped us from a data standpoint.
Michael Guzman.
Thank you. Pardon me, I'm not going to look at you so I can use the microphone so I can be heard. With the 1 year model, Dr. Feldman, I guess I didn't quite understand, or maybe I missed it. It sounded like you said you were starting with the state demographer's information, which, as this committee knows, we've also reviewed it at RTD, demonstrates a growth only in the older aging population currently for this region, and a pretty static and stable line for population in terms of children, young adults, 20s to 30s and 40s. But we see the largest spike in the aging. So thank you for adding a realistic add the population 1 year, the age of the population by 1 year in this. But does this model take into consideration how we will be growing because of that? The demographer's information is adjusting for that, or are you having to do that manually separate from this model? I guess I didn't understand how that's being calculated. Thank you.
So generally, we follow pretty strictly to what's coming out of the demography office. We make a couple of adjustments in the short term. So we have kind of more complete housing data. So for example, if we see that a county has built a lot of units, and then you can kind of calculate an implicit vacancy rate, how many units are there? Is it really reasonable that apartment vacancies would be 16%? That may not be. So we make some short-term adjustments a bit away from the demography office, but in general, we are following their data. They've got data on age of head, individuals, so we know their forecasts of every year of age going forward. And the crucial thing to think about is that just because the demography office, for example, has 2 adult households with kids as being relatively flat, there's a little bit of growth, but as you said, it's pretty flat. That doesn't mean that more households like that aren't coming to the region. So with this aging process, we're able to age those households gradually into being from 2 adults with 2 kid household. We're going to age that household, and eventually it's going to become 2 adult with 1 kid, and then a 2 adult with no kids, and then it's eventually going to be an older adult household. So that allows us to then backfill with household creation, because there are still households coming to this region that are younger, and there is household creation in this region.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? This stuff fascinates me, so I'm really appreciate what you've done, and please make sure you tell your team we appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to Our second discussion item, this is item number 7, the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan Update, the scenario results. So this is attachment E in your packet. We're going to hear from Alvin Badal Sanchez, the Regional Transportation Planning Program Manager. Alvin, good morning.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again. So another item related to our regional transportation plan, a pretty major activity that we've undertaken related to scenarios work. We have spent the last few months building these scenarios, testing them, and are in the sharing results stage. So I'll run through the schedule that's gotten us here, unveil those results, and talk through what some of the findings are that we've seen at the DRCOG staff side. Just a quick overview of the schedule. We did kick this off internally, as well as soliciting feedback from our committees and board last fall. We shared those results and started defining scenarios last winter. This spring, we kept defining those scenarios, started modeling those, testing those, having different iterations, reviewing the results, seeing what made sense. And so we're now in summer of this year, sharing those results with all of our different committees, with the board, and looking forward to the next few months as the RTP gets into our candidate project solicitation phase, so our call for projects. When it comes to scenario work here at the agency, we're using 2 different models. You just heard from one way that we're using our land use model. We use our travel model, and use both of those to determine how travel and mobility patterns are changing in the region. How do the different inputs in both of those affect the way people and goods are moving throughout the Denver region? I'm sure many of you have been through your own scenario planning exercises with your own agencies. Just want to set the stage, level everyone's expectations around what scenario planning means here at DRCOG. These are really big what-if alternative scenarios. And so we're doing relative comparisons at a regional level with some different metrics. It's not a rigorous evaluation. Ultimately, we're looking for policy guidance and direction to help as we develop our own plan and other planning work here at the agency, and be able to have a discussion around what are some of the choices and trade-offs that occur as you make particular investment in the region or grow a little differently. At the end of this exercise, we will not be picking one of these scenarios to move forward with. That is not the goal of this particular exercise. It is that choices and trade-offs, what happens if you go all in on one of these particular scenarios, what do we see occurring in the region? So we have a number of different scenarios split between transportation and land use. For each of these, I'll define what the adopted regional transportation plan looks like. Each of these 3 transportation scenarios: complete streets, transit, limited roadway expansion. And then on the land use side, we have our current land use, which uses DOLA's latest population and employment forecasts, and then what we're calling a transit-focused land use scenario. For each of these, the charts you're going to see, the results you're going to see are a summary of a lot more different results that we have available. There's a number of different handouts in the packet that delve a little deeper into each of these as well to provide a little more look into the different components of our particular scenarios. But for each of these, I'll run through a definition of what we looked at for them, highlight results around 3 metrics that we're comparing all of them to, and then talk about some of the findings that we're seeing. Before we get into the scenarios, just what do we talk about when we mean our current regional transportation plan? So this is the scenario that we're comparing all of our transportation work to. We have an adopted regional transportation plan. We have billions being spent across the region in a regional BRT network, in arterial safety, in active transportation, in freight projects. So when we talk about our current RTP, these are the investments that we're talking about that are spread across our 10-county area. When it comes to current land use, you just heard from Zach, but we're using our latest population and employment forecasts showing that slower growth. We do still expect to grow by 800,000, not the million we thought, but still growth in the region, and more older adults than we were expecting. It is based on existing zoning as we see it across the region, and it does take into account development that's already under construction or planned over the next few years. I mentioned we're a growing region. We still expect to grow by 800,000 by 2050. So in blue in this chart is where we were in 2023. In green is where we expect to be by 2050 with those forecasts. In addition to growing population, we also expect employment to continue to grow in the region out to 2050. And then three metrics that you'll be seeing repeated across this presentation: vehicle miles traveled, vehicle hours of delay, and transit walk and bike trips. These are the three metrics that we can pull from our model pretty easily. And so we've provided high-level comparisons of each of our scenarios using these three metrics. Again, in blue is where we were in 2023, what I'll just say is today. And then in green is where we expect to be in 2050. So with a growing population, we do still expect VMT to increase, vehicle hours of delay to increase, and transit walk bike trips to increase in the region. As we move into future charts, this green bar is going to be what you're seeing all these different transportation and land use scenarios compared to. How might each of these change the trajectory of each of those growth magnitudes in that green bar? So I'll start with the findings, just to prompt some discussion, prompt some thoughts as you work through a significant number of results you'll be seeing from me this morning. First one, land use is not the primary driver of mobility changes alone. If you were with us 5 years ago when we did the scenario work, you'll recall that our infill and centers land use scenarios really moved the needle when it comes to our transportation metrics. This year, we are not seeing that same movement with the land use scenarios by themselves. Moves to that second bullet point. To actually see movement around some of these metrics, we would need to see complementary transportation strategies invested in those areas. In addition to regional changes, there are also significant changes possible at the community and neighborhood level. So I'll also show a quick finding at the community level related to microtransit that we could expect in the region. So there are changes possible at both the regional level and then the community level. And then the number of different scenarios do help us get close to our MetroVision targets related to VMT, non-SOV delay, but it's really the combinations that show that change and get us closer to the objectives that we've established in MetroVision.
Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, sir, very much. Alvin, I hate to, I know you're midstream here, but I wanted to just qualify the top bullet a little bit more. I think it should be, it's no longer the primary driver of mobility change. You know, there's been a lot of changes since the last time that we did some scenario planning work, a lot of changes in land use. So it is still a driver of change, but is not as primary a driver as it used to be, let's say. Thank you.
So I'll start with our transportation scenarios. Again, as you see the term current RTP, it is those investments in the adopted regional transportation plan that we're comparing to. We've combined that with our current land use forecasts for each of these three transportation scenarios. I'll work through each of these in the order you're seeing on the screen, starting with complete streets. So what would it look like if active transportation is encouraged in the region through more bicycle pedestrian infrastructure? There are more e-bikes and e-scooters taking trips in the region. We've increased telecommuting in this scenario. And then we've also proposed connections across limited access highways with new overpasses and freeways, reconnecting communities that aren't currently connected and reconnecting some of that regional grid. The map on your left, I want to clarify, is just that third bullet point. At a high level, where could we potentially make those reconnections across highways to connect communities back together? It is not any of the other bullet points that you're seeing when we talk about more bike and pedestrian infrastructure, more e-bikes, e-scooters, increasing telecommuting. Those were done at the regional level. The map on the left is just looking at those new overpasses and underpasses in this scenario. So in gray is our current adopted regional transportation plan. This chart, I'll explain, since each of them is built a similar way, looks out to 2050. So compared to 2023, compared to today, we would expect VMT to increase by 25%, transit walk bike trips to increase by 41%, and delay to increase by 54%, with the current adopted RTP and our current land use. If we add to our RTP all that investment that I just explained on the previous slide, we could see a slight decrease in VMT potentially, a significant increase in transit walk bike trips in the region, and a slight decrease in delay. So as more folk are taking trips a little differently in the region, you see that transit walk bike trip bar chart specifically move pretty significantly. Shifting to our transit scenario, this scenario completes fast tracks, adds additional rail to the region, expands our bus rapid transit network. You'll remember we already have 11 corridors in our regional transportation plan. We add to that. Includes new high-frequency transit corridors. We increase the transit service in the region. propose to expand microtransit, implement a zero fare policy, and improve 8,000 bus stops across the region. So a very significant investment. Using those same three metrics, again, comparing to our current adopted RTP and our current land use, still an increase in VMT, but only 5% in this particular scenario. We're still growing by 800,000. Our VMT only increases by 5%, pretty significant. Our transit walk bike trips increase as well compared to our adopted RTP. And then in this case, you're seeing a negative number on this chart. So in this case, it is an actual reduction from 2023. So we're not just slowing the increase, we are actually decreasing delay compared to 2023 levels. Our limited roadway expansion scenario, this one is a break from the previous two, whereas complete streets and transit added to our regional transportation plan, this scenario takes away. So it's really grounded in the work around our greenhouse gas work to meet compliance and build on strategies that we had explored when we first looked at meeting compliance for the GHG Transportation Planning Standard. Sorry, I mumbled that one, GHG Transportation Planning Standard. So in this case, we are proposing the adopted regional transportation plan, but with no additional regionally funded roadway capacity projects. That means if a project in our plan uses CDOT funding, DRCOG funding, RTD doesn't widen roadways, but if there was RTD widening funding, those are no longer included in the regional transportation plan, and then no additional locally funded roadways wider than 4 lanes. So we have a number of projects in our regional transportation plan that are locally funded, that are led by locals, that are happening through development, through their own funding that they control. In this scenario, we are proposing limiting any widenings to 4 lanes that are currently in the plan. As you look across the 3 metrics, VMT doesn't really move between the adopted RTP and our current land use. There is a slight decrease in transit walk bike trips in this scenario and a significant increase in delay in this scenario. We expect that slight decrease in transit walk bike trips just to be as buses are sitting in that congestion. The attractiveness of that mode for that particular trip is no longer as high as the current RTP. And so we do see a slight decrease in transit walk bike trips and an increase in delay as we continue to grow by 800,000 people in the region and are limiting some of that expansion in our growing areas. We recognize that limited roadway expansion scenario isn't one we would just do by itself. We wouldn't just take away a project in the RTP. We also recognize all that funding couldn't necessarily go to another type of project. And so recognizing that, we proposed in this combination scenario, combining it with our complete streets scenario. So again, those same 3 metrics, slight decrease in VMT, significant increase in transit walk bike trips, and a slight decrease in delay. For each of these, there is a handout that shows maybe some additional results, breaking out a few of those components that folk might have interest in. And so for the complete street scenario, we did break out each of those different bullet points. What would it look like if we only did tele-work? What would it look like if we only improved the attractiveness of biking and walking in the region? What would it look like if we only reconnected the regional grid? And then for the transit scenario, we also looked at the magnitude of change that zero fare was having on transit walk bike trips, vehicle hours of delay, and VMT in the region, just to show a different component for that. Shifting gears to our land use scenario components. We have a transit-focused land use scenario. I know that can get a little confusing. We have our transit transportation scenario and our transit-focused land use scenario. But in our transit-focused land use scenario, we focused on the physically constrained transit investments that we already have in our regional transportation plan. We have an established rail network. We have a proposed BRT network across the region, 11 BRT corridors. We have corridor transit projects planned in the region, and so we focused on these geographies. And in these geographies, we increased capacity to 40 dwelling units per acre along those corridors. And then to encourage growth along those corridors, we did decrease capacity in other areas of the region. A new chart that we haven't shown with the other transportation scenarios. So to walk through this one, left to right, top to bottom, we start with our current land use. That's again the slower growth, the more older adults. If we look at those transit geographies that we already have in the plan, our BRT networks, our high-frequency buses, right now, those areas are about 35% of households in the region. By 2050, without any other policy changes, we could expect that share to be 36%. And it would capture 38% of the growth occurring in the region. So our current land use scenario focused on investments that are already planned in the regional transportation plan would capture about 38% of growth out to 2050. Making those policy changes in our transit-focused scenario, if we look at those same geographies, again, 35% today, 2023, but the share of households within that geography with this scenario would increase to 41%. And the share of growth being captured would increase to 57%. And coming back to the metrics we've been showing throughout the presentation, going back to that first bullet point that we noted, across each of these three metrics, you are not seeing significant change between these two current land use scenario and then our transit-focused land use scenario. So to our earlier point, land use is not the main, primary, only driver this cycle. So to bring it all back together to provide some comparisons for each of these three metrics across the scenarios, starting from left to right, our dark gray bar is our current adopted RTP with our current land use, which is where we expect to be by 2050. Moving across that line, we get into our transit-focused land use scenarios. This is where we start pairing our land use scenario with our transportation scenarios to see how they build off of each other. Our current RTP with that transit-focused land use scenario, again, doesn't really move the needle in terms of vehicle miles traveled, but when you start pairing complementary transportation strategies with that transit-focused land use scenario, you start seeing that movement. So VMT is still increasing in our complete street scenario paired with our land use scenario, but only by 15% now. Significant movement on our transit and our complete streets and transit combo scenario. Again, any number negative in this chart shows an actual reduction compared to 2023 levels, not just a slowing of that increase that we expect. Transit walk bike trips, similar story. We don't see much change with our current RTP and a transit-focused land use, but again, that pairing of transportation strategies really moves the needle when it comes to transit walk bike trips. The greatest movement seeing in our complete street scenario and then that combo complete streets transit scenario, but still significant growth compared to our adopted regional transportation plan. And then finally, delay. Same story as previously, no significant movement between the adopted RTP and a pairing with our land use scenario. Biggest changes you're seeing are actual reductions when pairing our transit-focused land use scenario with our transit scenario and our transit-focused land use scenario with our combo transportation scenario. So 6% reduction compared to today's levels, 2023, almost 30% reduction when using our combination scenarios, really putting everything together. And those were regional metrics that we were looking at. Regional findings, we did want to highlight what could occur at a community neighborhood level, specifically microtransit. There's a lot of interest in the region around microtransit, a number of different studies being led by DRCOG through our set-asides, interest through our RTD's partnership program, and so wanted to see what that could look like. As you read that sub-bullet point about 150 to 250 rides a day, that's not something we can really capture in our travel model, but those rides are a critical piece of folks' lives in the region, being able to access their doctor, get to the laundromat, get to school, visit friends, being able to thrive in their communities. And so did want to highlight that there are still benefits to the proliferation of microtransit in the region. This is based on findings that we heard from our local partners who do have microtransit service through their own reporting that they're doing as they implement and evaluate that service. So bringing it back to those key takeaways again, land use, while still a driver of mobility changes, is not the only primary driver this cycle. It takes that complementary transportation strategy combination to actually see movement in those three metrics that I was showing on those charts. In addition to regional changes, there are potential significant changes at the community and neighborhood level. Part of our work was also exploring other discrete geographies to see how particular changes could impact mobility. And again, depending on the different MetroVision target that we're exploring, our various scenarios can get us close, but it's those combinations that really show the biggest magnitude of change and moving the needle towards those. Some next steps. We anticipate developing a report on this effort. Right now, it's the whole appendix in the Regional Transportation Plan. We want to update that for this particular effort, delve into a few other results that weren't highlighted in this presentation. And then we've been sharing this with other committees and the board. We've had a number of discussions with the Transportation Advisory Committee on, well, what's next? How do we use these results? So those will continue over the next month as we look towards our call for projects that we want later in the year. But no, it was focused on scenarios. Do want to provide just a quick general update on the RTP. We have stood up 2 different advisory groups. One is a civic advisory group, really focused on interested residents who we might not have engaged previously, who haven't been part of our process before. And then a youth advisory panel really focusing on the youth in our region, going to the different youth boards and commissions in our various local government partners and seeing if anyone's interested in participating in our panel to give us the youth perspective out to 2050. Some quick takeaways from each of those. We've held our first kickoff meeting with them, really high level, qualitative. What do they want to see in the region as they look forward? What do they think is missing in our region that they'd like to see? And then asking them to envision what they want their neighborhood to look like, could look like out in 25, and how can we take this feedback and build our plan around these findings and investments. And then pairing it with our youth advisory panel just to see how different those might be. Same questions asked of them. We anticipate each of these groups meeting 3 or 4 more times throughout the planning process, paired with the same milestones that our committees and the board are hearing so that they're getting the same information, providing feedback at key milestones as well. So that concludes my presentation, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alvin. I just want to compliment this effort with the youth advisory programs. I think that reaching out to, and I saw high school folks, I think that is commendable. So thank you for doing that. Other questions or comments? Director Mulvey.
Thank you. I concur, and I appreciate you reaching out to the different groups too. This is really comprehensive. My question is that on slide 27 about microtransit, I might be misunderstanding what microtransit is, because I typically think of it as a bicycle or a scooter, but then in the description, it refers to grocery stores, laundromats, and schools. So I'm struggling with how one might use microtransit to get your toddlers to daycare or get your laundry.
So microtransit in this case, examples in the region are Denver's Connector, that I believe is in 3 different communities, and then the Link. So what was formerly branded the Lone Tree Link. We use the term shared micromobility for bikes and scooters, which might be the confusion. But in this case, we're talking about smaller vehicles, wheelchair accessible vehicles, can be on demand, can have a fixed route service that are picking up passengers in a particular geography and dropping them off in that particular geography.
Great. Thank you for helping me understand that better. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Yes, Shelley.
Thank you. Alvin, I concur about broadening participation. It always worries me when I go to a community meeting meant to get input into a long-range plan, and most of the hairs are like mine, you know, they're gray. So I'm really glad that you're proactively reaching out. On the transit-focused land use, you talk about 40 units per acre, which is great. You know, you have that kind of density around a transit stop. But do you assume also commercial mixed use? I mean, that adds so much in terms of livability and the ability to take short trips and so forth. Daily needs met.
So this exercise was focused around housing development, just those 40 units per acre. We found out through most of this exercise that a lot of these areas are already at or above that 40. And so the second bullet point is really where we tried to encourage that growth in those geographies. Without that second bullet point, we really didn't see that growth focusing around those corridors without that sub-bullet point. I'll ask if there's anything specific from the land use modeling side that Zach would like to add to the mixed use piece. I have a number of different, I forget what the term is, but colleagues who can support in this effort. This was a team effort across 3 different teams to build these and share the results.
Yeah, as Alvin was describing, for this scenario, it was really focused on housing, but we didn't squash down in any way the capacities already there for employment, which in general are fairly high along these corridors.
Yeah, employment is good because then you've got that piece. But I was thinking as well, mixed use for retail or civic or, you know, restaurants and that kind of thing where you can walk to it if you have that also in your cluster, in your higher density. And being able to get a handle on what those optimal mixtures might be, I think that'd be really useful for communities.
Yeah, and unfortunately, our forecast is really kind of regionally focused, so we don't kind of have that level of detail. So we are dropping housing units and employment by sector and households into census blocks, but we are no longer, we used to do a parcel model where we kind of match up buildings to parcels and put everything into buildings. Gains from that tended to not be worth how much work it was to get everything lined up. So we no longer really have that joined together quite as well. So there could be employment, there could be retail, there could be housing in a census block. We're not necessarily modeling it as being kind of in the same building and built out as kind of mixed use in the same way.
One last thought was that your complete streets mapping showed some areas that may, by their nature, encourage that. I saw that 88th and Sheridan looks like where Westminster's downtown area is one such spot. And so it may be that it's lending itself to complete streets focus because it has those kinds of attributes. So thank you. It's really interesting stuff.
Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, sir, very much. Man, you were anticipating that. I wanted to, you saw me going with the mic? No, thank you, sir, very much. And listen, I did want to thank staff for all the work they've done on this. It's a tremendous amount of work. I know we have a couple of our modelers back here, transportation demand forecasting modelers back here. I want to thank them for their work. But I do think staff has a good time doing this, right? It's like Transportation Sim City, right? It's like, what if, right? And, you know, my takeaways on this stuff has always been, you know, I guess I'm overwhelmed a little bit by the magnitude of our transportation network. It's ginormous, right? And moving the needle, what has to happen in order to move the needle is also ginormous. Like some of these scenarios, they are really juiced, right? There's a lot of stuff in them in order to get them to move. Like, you know, on the free fares scenario, we also have, you know, a significant increase in transit service and all that. But there is no mistaking that there's a very strong correlation between vehicle hours, I guess there's a negative correlation between vehicle hours of delay reduction, VMT reduction, and increase in service, increase in active transportation, those types of things, right? So I mean, I don't think anybody could dispute that. You know, the thing, of course, that, you know, you might be asking yourself is, well, what's the cost associated with these scenarios? You'll notice we did not share costs associated with because they are also ginormous. But I think as you know, kind of as an academic exercise, it really is interesting just to see, you know, kind of you turn levers to see and what happens. But yeah, I'll just leave it there. But I really do appreciate the effort.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Director Mulvey. I'm sorry, Director Maurer. I was looking at Director Guzman, and
Thank you for the work. Yes, there's a lot of good work here, and I really like the parts you put together. It's very easy to understand. So tell me, how does this fit, though, with the no additional regional funded roadway capacity projects, which we've been going that way for a long time, and I understand that. But just for an example, like if you're at US 85 in Littleton, where they have that redevelopment going on there, big changes going on there, I believe that is a capacity type project, and I think going forward, we're gonna see more of that in certain areas where it's a redevelopment, and you're gonna, you know, and it may be like you don't have all that development over here, but you're moving it over here, but it still is a capacity project. And how do we handle that?
Yeah, so specific to that one, but for all of these scenarios, I think one of the underlying foundations is we all hear in different venues from different audiences. If you just did this, you would solve X, and so the limited roadway expansion scenario responds to one of those. If we just stopped widening our roadways, we would fix transit ridership. Everyone would start taking the bus. People would start biking, walking differently. So for all of them, we're not going to pick one moving forward, but they're rooted in just exploring what happens if we really did try that only by itself. The limited road expansion specifically, we grounded in our GHG planning standard work that we started a conversation around regionally funded projects back in 2022, I believe. And so just responding to some of the larger questions we hear in these venues, building a definition around work that the region's already familiar with through the GHG transportation planning standard is how we got to that particular scenario. It's not a value judgment on any particular project in there, just a high-level threshold for what did we do potentially in 2022? How could that potentially, in a scenario, big what if, carry over for this definition?
Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, sir, very much. I just want to respond also to that. Thank you, Alvin, for the response. But I think, you know, the purpose, as Alvin mentioned, is that, you know, we are, you know, when we talk to stakeholders, they talk about not increasing capacity, right? I mean, we understand that within this region, there are hotspots that capacity is really the only way to really fix it, right? There's areas in which operational improvements could serve as a surrogate for that capacity improvement. And I know in particular, like areas like Central I-25, for example, those are areas where CDOT right now is considering some operational improvements in order to do that. But whether that fixes the problem or not, I don't know. But I think the conversation that we want to have is that I think we want to have a more cognizant approach to this. I mean, and really think about, well, do we need to add capacity there? And in a lot of cases, yes, right? But if you even look at the results of that scenario, it does not improve our regional transportation network, right? In the year 2050, it actually increases VMT, our vehicle hours of delay, significantly, right? 20-some-odd% over what we're currently proposing in the 2050 plan. So I think Alvin's right. It's not a value judgment on anything. We just need to have a very, sophisticated approach to how we handle this stuff. And, you know, I'm with you. I think there are certain areas of this region that capacity has improved, you know, so thank you.
Director Guzman.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mulvey, thank you so much for your question about the microtransit, because I wrote that very same thing in my notes. Define this. For me, working here in the metro area, microtransit has a variety of definitions, so it really did depend on what you were talking about. So I'm grateful you asked that. That said, all of these scenarios are super awesome. Thank you for the academic exercise with it. I would say removing less used routes to provide transit along higher density areas will be a fight, particularly in Jefferson County and Douglas County, where lines don't extend all the way to the edge of the county. Certainly something that the board has tossed around and discussed in limited ways, but that's why there are 15 of us to represent our areas and subregions. There is an equity piece that goes into that. So it's an interesting scenario, but I caught it. And I would say I wouldn't want to give up anything in Denver unless it really does help make it equitable in other areas. Certainly the financial piece of this is real, and that's something that needs to be considered But with respect to the question of microtransit and the difference between regional, local, and then neighborhood moving people around, that certainly is a question that gets down to whether you're dealing with municipal, county level, or regional level government and how it's being funded, all for the purpose of moving people, all for the purpose of putting tax dollars to use, but also it meets other state requirements. You know, Mr. Silverstein with the air quality control and reducing emissions, really trying to make the modal shift from single occupancy vehicles to other things, but then concerns with fire mitigation, concerns with how we move. We talked about last time large freight movement on our corridors and things like that. Those are all considerations that we have to take into this as we sit here and make these decisions. None of it's easy, and what you give up or say yes to matters to a great deal of people. It can impact work, it can impact families, it can impact other areas. So I like the exercise is what I'm trying to say, but there's a lot that was in this one in particular that we've dealt with for the last couple of months, and other things that I'm thinking about in terms of public transportation and what that looks like in a region our size. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, Alvin. Thank you again, Zach. I will call to your attention an information item. The active transportation plan is attachment F. If anyone does have questions, Aaron Villery is here to answer any questions, but I do think that, yes, Jacob.
Yeah, if I could just say just a couple words about it, what's actually in your packet. Try that again, there we go. We've been working on a major update to our active transportation plan, which we last updated in 2019. We've been doing this work in tandem with CDOT, who is also updating the statewide active transportation plan. We are getting close to pulling together kind of the draft final report and doing a public comment period. So this item is really just to let you know what's coming and the highlights of what's in the plan. We will be presenting this sort of similar information to our board tomorrow night if you're interested in a little bit more detail. And then we'll let everyone know when the draft plan comes out for public comment. Thank you.
Yes, Director Packboss.
I just want to say that we appreciate the collaborative process in developing the plans, because we know we have a statewide effort from the CDOT plan, and then of course the DRCOG plan is looking at the local efforts within the Denver area. And then my staff has been appreciative of the efforts to go through and working with your staff. So wanted to pass that along.
Thank you, and likewise.
All right. We're going to move on to our administrative items. This is member comment and any other matters. We'll have CDOT first. Shelley?
How's that?
There we go.
Okay. So a few things to report. We have some new members. Replacing those who you were familiar with here, especially we're in Karen's spot, we have Elise Jones. She's likely also familiar to folks here. Currently the director of SWEEP at the state level. And we've got Juan Marcano, who is a former council member in Aurora. He'll take the place of Eula Adams. And we have outstate Terry Hart, who was out of Pueblo, is reappointed. And then Barbara McLaughlin, who is a former state rep in Durango. She'll be the rep for that southwest part of the state. We're still waiting for Jessica Holguin's replacement, so hoping to have that in the next few weeks. Let's see, we had a couple of really fine celebratory events. Alameda Bridge opened. If you were familiar with that, at near south of Broadway, near Broadway and south of Ellsworth. That bridge was the oldest extant bridge before it was replaced in the state system. You know, it was built in 1911. It was expanded somewhat after the 1965 floods. So much needed replacement. It's wider. It's got dedicated bike and trail, or bike lane and then trail under the viaduct for the South Platte River. It's really quite nice. And then a mobility hub at one of the Lone Tree stations. So it'll combine access for those nearby for the light rail on the E line plus, Mustang has a stop there, and they mean for it to be a lot of walk-up. I think it's near their city center planned station, or I mean their station, but they plan for more city center type uses there. Let's see, we've got some interesting things. I wanted to acknowledge folks from both RTD and DRCOG who participated in the 4P meetings or are participating in. This is CDOT's launch of stakeholder engagement for its 10-year plan. And I was able to attend both the Broomfield one and the JEPCO one recently. Those entail presentations by RTD about planning efforts underway or what might be germane. And DRCOG, both Alvin and Jacob were there, really helpful to have their input. And, Darius is the expert on this. So if you had any questions about how that's getting underway and what we'll be doing, that would be the good thing. On this week's meetings, we have, not much action items. We need to update our budget, First Amendment to our budgets, because we adopt budgets before the legislative session concludes. So we need to go back through mainly and do some cleanup on that to make the numbers jibe with legislation that was passed. And we're having some sort of introductory pieces that will help new members especially, but a good refresher for all of us on our transit efforts, on the winter planning, which is a major thing for CDOT, getting through the winter, and on things like the loss history. One thing I was really happy to note in the backup is that they've been able to decrease injuries pretty significantly, including most dramatically, or slip and fall, or what they call slip and trip at CDOT. So really good to see that kind of good news. So that's all I have. I'll turn it over to Darius.
Darius?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the only thing I would add on to that is at the commission workshop tomorrow, there'll be a discussion about end of winter maintenance review and a update from the transit connection study that will be presented at TC as well, plus an overview of the GHG planning standard for our new commissioners. So, and then that's all I have to report this month as well.
Thank you very much. RTD, Dr. Guzman.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Couple things to update people on. So the downtown rail reconstruction project, we are continuing to work on that. Most of you remember last summer we did reconstruct some intersections downtown. We are planning kind of the next phases of that, which will begin later this summer in August, where the Calumet crossing by Auraria will be rebuilt. So that will be starting in August. Subsequent construction phases are kind of being put together through a progressive design build methodology, and will those additional phases will start sometime early next year. We've also launched a security-related metrics website. We have monthly reports available on security-related calls for service, security calls for boardings, arrests, and other things. And again, we're have a website now that reports on that. I think our GM CEO, Deborah Johnson, last time reported on kind of some of the significant results that we're seeing between a 55% and 82% declines each month of 2025 when compared to the same period last year. So again, really seeing results on that front. We just completed our customer and community survey. We had some very positive results. We had kind of positive movement on areas measured by perceptions of safety, on-time performance, and cleanliness on kind of 19 out of 19 areas. Light rail improved from 16 out of 19. Customer satisfaction on services, again, also improved. And, in comparing ourselves to other folks nationally, again, as a benchmarking, we do compare very favorably on some of those kind of national benchmarks. On the employment side, we did do employment aspects. We have, again, a positive trend there, alignment with the agency's mission and vision, perception personal security, employee trust and decision-making, and support for professional development all saw increases year over year. And then the next thing I'll report on is our proposed service change for August. We will see some pretty notable changes on some routes, and, you know, increasing like the FF2 and reintroduction of the FF4. So again, seeing positive on that. Increases in service on the Route 135 on Smoky Hill and several other routes kind of throughout our system. So with that, I will turn it over to our board directors if they have anything else to add.
Michael Guzman, Director, District C, Northwest Denver. Since we've last met, approved the Central Park Development project over along the A line as a transit-oriented development process. I'd be remiss not to say happy birthday to our General Manager, CEO. Hope it's a wonderful day, yes. And I promise I will try to get through our finance and planning meeting as expeditiously as possible tonight, so that she can enjoy her evening. We do look forward to the 2024, well, we received the 2024 annual comprehensive report, and it was offered with no issues and no withholding. Our audit committee did an amazing job on that. We do have the 2026 comprehensive operational analysis coming before us tonight. Comprehensive operational analysis within the transit world is to be able to figure out who's moving where are the places they need to go, where do we need to reroute buses and do that sort of work, and what can be done to provide better transit. So as you are talking about cooperation with regional transit participation on all of these things, that is the way we start. And this is proving the money to be able to begin that process, so it will be going forward into 2026. In order to look at our region as a whole now after the pandemic and make decisions accordingly. We also have an ongoing bus stop infrastructure accessibility assessment happening currently that looks at our 9,000 plus bus stops, of which RTD is responsible for only 300, and participating with our local municipalities and counties to be able to figure out what we can do and how we make those better for people, and what that investment might look like. Tomorrow night on Operations Committee, they will be discussing the Access on Demand program modifications that are being presented to the board. For those of you that don't know, that is a paratransit service where they can call for an immediate ride if they qualify for that program. It is quite costly to the agency, but it is really important to our community, and so we need to figure out how to make it work. And so they're bringing us the minds at RTD have worked together to bring us some recommendations, and that will be considered by the committee and then perhaps brought forward to the board if it satisfies the questions of the committee. All that to say, we're busy doing our work. August is our month off. We will return in September, ready to jump into budget season, ready to jump into review season, and ready to finish up our work for the year. So I think we're almost there. I see light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Director Penker.
To be this year, the RTD board did agreement to go forward TDOT and short range pass and to this is a big step, not the final step, to start building rail for Collins.
Very exciting, I would say. Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's go on to RAC, Director Silverstein.
Thank you very much. And a couple announcements. We're going to be holding what we're calling our Blueprint workshops. And the first one is next week here in this room. Thank you, DRCOG, for volunteering your space to us and helping us with logistics. This is a meeting by invitation to many of the members of your communities. The TAC, for example, all have been notified of our Blueprint exercise to help us frame a long-term plan for air quality improvement strategy, evaluations, and program improvements for our region over time. And so we're holding 2 of these workshops. They're all-day workshops to get not only to let folks know what we're doing, but to gather input and get ideas about what we should be working on and moving forward with all of our stakeholders. So again, our first meeting is July 22 here in this room here in Denver. Our second meeting is a month later in Fort Collins as our region, PACS region, entire Front Range, outside of course, the DRCOG region up into the Front Range region. That's on August 18. So we invite everyone to spread the word about these workshops, sign up and attend with us. It's in-person attendance. When you have a workshop, it's really tough to have a kind of a hybrid approach. We do have the ability to broadcast our meetings for not for participation, but monitor what we're doing. But the meetings are in person. Forward to as the room can hold, we hope, and participate with. And my second announcement would be to acknowledge the what's called the non-attainment area air pollution mitigation pollution enterprise. I think I got that wrong there. I got my acronym in front of me. It's NAPME. And thank you, Darius, for managing that enterprise and the work that's done there for granting the RAC $1.5 million to add to our piggy banks for expanding and improving our incentive programs, our education and outreach programs, the actual air pollution mitigation. And so that this grant will help us continue in the future with secure state funding that's not, kind of a constant state of jeopardy that federal funding. And so we look forward to working with CDOT in as they manage dollars over time and deploying these monies hopefully as early as 2026 in our region, which is via programs and outreach, electrification of food trucks and other small equipment that where we find a lot of vehicle idling, and bike share programs in low income and subsidized housing programs. So really exciting efforts that we have at RAC, and thankful to this enterprise for granting money. That's my announcement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't know if any of us will ever get used to this, which button to push, which light should be lighted, but I'll open it up. Anybody else that may have some news to share? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Our next meeting will be August 19th. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Make sure you see Cam for your parking tickets if you're in the garage downstairs. Thank you, everyone. Safe travels home or back to work, wherever you're going.